As new people come into our industry and older ones leave, it's important for young professionals to gain insights from those who have gone before them. Welcome to Legacy Voices. Legacy Voices is a podcast series that gives listeners the opportunity to learn from experienced HVAC and smart building controls veterans who are sharing their hard-won wisdom and invaluable knowledge with the next generation. Now here is your host, Eric Stromquist.
All right, welcome to Legacy Voices. I am so excited about our guest this week. His name is Rick LeBlanc, and I tell you, somebody that has a lot to share. Rick has done a myriad of things in his lifetime, everything from starting with the elevators and working on elevators to working with MCC Powers, which was eventually was acquired by Siemens, but Rick went from everything from pneumatics to DDC to working as a consultant to working as a mentor to leaders. So much Rick has to offer. Rick, thanks for taking time to share your life on Legacy Voices.
Well, great. Hey, Eric, this is a wonderful thing you do for the industry, and you do so many good things. I'm glad to be part of it. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Well, let's start at the beginning. I mean, you sound like you had an entrepreneurial spirit right from the start, but walk me through sort of where you were born and, your childhood and sort of how you got into, sounds like your father had a big influence on you, but how you got into controls.
Well, as many people know, I'm Canadian. So I grew up in Canada, north of Toronto, about 300 miles, a little mining town called Sudbury, Ontario. And my father was the Otis elevator representative for that part of the world. And he taught me work ethic and taught me that learn a craft, learn a trade, be good to people. And it was so wonderful. Yeah, he was a big factor in my life. And so I went to university. I went to the University of Toronto. I was fortunate. I was good in school, went to the University of Toronto to electrical engineering.
Okay.
And my father said, gee, that's great. It's wonderful. Why don't you get a trade to fall back on in case this management stuff doesn't work out? So he got me into the elevator trade. And the elevator trade is a wonderful thing because it's mechanical, electrical, hydraulics, electronics, everything you could think of from a technology point of view. And so I started as an apprentice while I was at university. And by the time I finished university, I had my journeyman ticket through the elevator union in Toronto.
Very cool.
Then I graduated.
Well, hang on a second. I want to stop back again, but, go back just for a second because, again, it sounds like your dad was quite an influence on you. I know mine was on me. You mentioned something about, your dad said, be good to people. And I'm wondering, my dad said, kind of the same thing, but what's the best advice your dad gave you regarding relationships with people?
Be honest.
Yeah.
Tell the truth. Even if it's a hard message, be straightforward, be tactful and empathetic, but tell the truth.
Very good.
And listen.
Excellent. Okay, so that got you up to you graduate from school. What happens next? Well,
this was a time when the early 70s where there was lots of jobs. So there was a job fair at the university. And so a whole bunch of companies showed up, Honeywell, Johnson Controls, Otis Elevator, and a little company called Powers Regulator Company. And I was interviewing everywhere, and I got an offer from a number of companies, Otis Elevator included, and Powers Regulator. And the individual was the branch manager in the Toronto branch for Powers, and he was just a charismatic guy, and I liked him a lot. So I took the Powers job. And what he said was, we sell pneumatic controls, which is not what you do in your electrical engineering, but we're getting into energy management systems, which are electronic on-off monitoring type systems, and that's why we're hiring electrical engineers. So I joined Powers as a sales engineer, estimating jobs and selling, specifying engineers, negotiating with contractors, and that was my first job.
So what do you wish you, because we got a lot of our listeners who might be on their first job, what do you sort of wish you knew then that you know now? Put another way, what advice would you give people on their first job?
Well, I was a salesperson, and it was important in the building controls area to understand the technology. So I wish I had learned more about the design, the engineering, the installation. Later in my career, one of the things we did was when new salespeople came aboard, we put them in the field for 6 months to go around with this installer, go around with this service technician, sit in the factory and make panels. And I wish I'd have done that when I started, because that's very valuable information. It makes you more knowledgeable as a salesperson.
You know, couldn't agree more, Rick. I know before I started, I worked as a boiler contractor's helper for like a year, and then I actually worked for the Honeywell branch for a little bit. And I think that's just really great advice for anybody that is hiring people that are going to be technical salespeople. If you have the opportunity to have them spend some time in the field with techs, it was invaluable to me. At the very least, you know, I learned how to talk to techs, right? Because ultimately they're the ones that are going to be putting the product in, and if they don't like you, it kind of can get in the way of you being successful, I think, selling technical products.
Interesting thing, Eric. One thing that we learned when we started to do this in the branch organization was it revealed a person's true attitude. And what I mean by that, you have people who are willing to do that and people who are sponges for information. You had other people who had a real negative pushback on that. They said, "Oh, yeah, I'm a college grad. I'm not going to go out with Johnny on the tools and get my hands dirty."
Yeah.
Well, that tells you something about somebody, and it's wrong, number one, and two, it doesn't value the part that they play in the overall solution, and that was a real revealing thing for us.
Yeah, very, 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 very good observation there, Rick. Couldn't agree more. So Powers is a great company. So who sort of taught you the sales route at Powers? Did you have a mentor there?
Yeah, the branch manager of the Toronto branch at the time was a guy named Marv Lindgren. And Marv took us under his wing. There was 2 or 3 of us that started at the same time. He took us under his wing, and he would take us on contractor calls, engineer calls. He would go into a negotiation if we were called in to try to win a bid. And he was just excellent at that. Very, very much of a coach, mentor. I played sports when I was a kid, like most of us did. And, you know, you get some coaches who just yell at you and say, you should have done this, you should have done that. You get other coaches who say, here's the right way to do it. Why don't you practice this? Why don't you learn from this guy? And this, Marv was that kind of a coach. He was very much of a teacher. And it's much more effective in my mind than the coach that yells at you on the bench.
Yeah, or doesn't say anything like Bill Belichick, right?
Right.
Well, so did you, because I know you do a lot of, we'll get to this later, but I know that, you know, you're a mentor to leaders and do a lot of mentoring too. Did that sort of give you some ideas about how to mentor other people? Do you practice a lot of what Marv practices when you mentor others?
Oh, absolutely. What I typically do in a mentor-coach situation is try to find out what the person thinks their needs are. Are they self-aware? Do they even know what they need to know? And then go from there. Try to give them instruction or suggestions on how to get better, self-development, whether it's one of your podcasts or whether it's something else I'll recommend. And then I watch and see, are they serious about learning? Have they done it? Did they follow through? Because here's one of my beliefs, Eric. One of my beliefs is attitude is more important than skill. That is, if you don't have the right attitude, you're not going to develop good skills.
Yeah.
But if you have the right attitude, and that's true of learning, that's true of team building, that's true of collaborating with others, working with others. Attitude is key. And one of the things I look for in mentoring is, does the person have a want to learn attitude?
You give somebody a task because you want to know about that attitude. And I couldn't agree more. Give me somebody with a good attitude and we can work together. They can be part of a team and we can make it happen. But again, I think we get so many people possibly coming up now, and I haven't met many in our industry, but in other industries, that, well, I'm not going to do that. And it's, I think part of what a good mentor does is a good mentor will test you, right? Not only to see about your attitude, but to help you become more self-aware.
Yeah, here's a test. If I'm mentoring somebody, I'll suggest that they collaborate with 2 or 3 other people to do a project.
Yeah.
And sometimes what you'll get is pushback that says, oh, they're difficult to work with. I don't like so-and-so. And it could be a bias that they have. It could be some people have a bias that I don't work with old people, or I don't work with people who aren't a college graduate, or I don't like foreigners. That bias comes out when you put them into a team building organization. And the people with a good attitude figure it out.
Yeah.
They make it work.
Well, they do it. And I think that, right now it seems like there's just a lack of workforce. So I think a lot of people get away with a lot, but like everything else cyclical, that'll change. And there'll come another time when it's more difficult to get a good job, I think. Do you remember an airline, Rick, called SAS, Scandinavian Airline?
Sure. Yeah.
Back in the day, this is a story that, I think really sort of nails what you're saying. SAS was known for having the best customer support and service of any airline ever. But, they just gave great support and and it made them very successful. But their interview process was kind of interesting, Rick. You probably know this story, but they would bring all the candidates in at the same time. And they put them in a big room and they bring them in one by one and interview them. But they didn't care what they were saying on the interview. They were actually watching to see the people as they were waiting. Were they engaging with other people? Were they encouraging? Were they reaching out to other people? And those were the people that got hired.
Well, that's very similar to some of the training courses I've run at different companies, and that is you get 10, 12 people into a training course, and let's say it's a manufacturer's course, 3 days. The manufacturer's rep comes in and does their presentation. A good part of what you watch is the interaction between the people.
Yeah.
That is, do they help one another? Are they supportive? Somebody doesn't know how to do something. Somebody goes and helps them, or the reverse, where somebody pretends they know, but they're using the wrong terminology. And you see that in these groups, and it helps you understand who are the ones that you want to promote and who are the ones that you want to give bigger responsibility. Bigger responsibility almost always has the need to manage other people or work with other people. So it really is a telltale to watch that interaction.
Rick, I know you mentor a lot of folks, older folks like me and some of the younger folks. Talk to me about, some of the things you find that you have to work with the younger folks on, maybe you don't have to work with the older folks on, and what are some of the blind spots some of the older folks have when you mentor them?
What I see is a lot of people are Google one-pagers.
Okay.
That is, if they want to know DDC, they go to Google, they put in DDC, they read the first page. They don't do anything else. They don't talk to somebody that was in the industry. They don't read a book. They don't call somebody who is an expert on that. They read the first page of Google.
Got it.
They think they know everything.
Yeah.
Because that's how they do everything. For example, I've got a son-in-law who teaches history. While he's teaching, the kids are on the internet checking what he's saying.
Nice.
Rather than taking notes.
Yeah.
And it says, so they'll say something like, well, it says here that, that there's this and that. And of course, the internet's full of all kinds of wrong information, conspiracy theories. I mean, it's not the place to get all your information. Okay, so what I see with, I mentor a lot of people who are general managers, VPs, or C-suite. C-suite people who maybe they've run a company, now they're going to be CEO or chief operating officer. And what I see is a lot of these people miss the people side of things. Teams win championships. You got to build a great team. You got to have the right people in the right seat, as they say, but you've got to develop those people. And I see some of the people that are trying to be GMs or CEOs, they have the vision that, well, I'm pretty smart because I got this job, therefore I know everything, and I don't have to ask anybody.
Nice.
It's actually a weakness to ask somebody. They think it's a weakness to ask somebody. And what I coach them on is, no, you can't pretend you know something. Because when you do that, people that do know will see that you're not being honest. And plus, you'll never learn anything.
Right. Well, yeah. So it's interesting. So, the younger people you mentor, they check it, but that maybe their information is not correct because they're doing the one page on Google. And then some of the older people don't check it at all. And,
right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Well, and this is a common thing I see, Eric, is when somebody gets promoted to a CEO role, they think they're supposed to know everything. That's why they got the job. And they're afraid to admit they don't know something.
Yeah.
And they either hide it or they try to fake it. And what I coach them on is to say, no, if you don't understand something, just say that.
Yeah.
If you don't understand this, ask around the room, can anybody help me learn this? And that's not a weakness. That shows people you're honest, and it opens up, everybody is now honest. They don't feel bad about sharing what they don't know. And you've got to overcome the fact that you're the CEO and you can't know everything. It's impossible to know everything.
Well, no, it is. And genuine humility and being willing to say you don't know sort of sets the stage, like you just indicated, that other people can feel comfortable saying, I don't know that either. Because the one thing you don't want to do is proceed forward with people who don't know what they're doing. And I'm kind of talking about U.S. politics here, but not really. But so Rick, you went from the pneumatic phase with Powers, and you came to the United States as one of the first, DDC people with Powers, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, actually the first product manager for the building automation system. I was recruited, and I came to the U.S. For that, and we started in the early 80s.
And early 80s, there weren't a lot of players back then, so it was the new technology, right? We went from pneumatics to electric to DDC. So what did you learn about introducing a new technology that wasn't readily accepted at the time?
Well, there was a group of folks that thought we shouldn't displace pneumatics. Pneumatics had served us well for dozens of years, and lots of systems installed. And this newfangled electronic stuff might not work, and it might not be as good. So we had to convince people that it was, not only was it as good, it was better. And you could do PID loops, you could do Boolean logic, you could do a lot of things. And if you recall back then, the pneumatic systems did the closed loop control. The electronic supervisory systems did the fans and the pumps on off monitoring. It was an integration of the two of them, and it was in fact better because you could do things that you couldn't do before easily, or you could do them less expensively. And the overall system, the combined system, came to be less expensive than the two systems.
Right, because you didn't have to replace those big pneumatic valves and actuators and stuff like that with electric. So, we had a whole new thing with the IP switches and EP switches and all that good stuff. So it took a while to take off because, like all new technologies, and I'm sort of going here with something, sort of putting your business hat on when you advise business people. One of the memories I had about that time period, Rick, was that, on paper, it made sense, right? And so, you'd have companies like yours who really knew what they were doing. They understood the equipment. But then you had people coming out of the woodwork, some of these computer nerds, and, we'll just turn stuff on and off. We'll save energy because we were trying to save energy back then. And they might, damage a huge compressor or something like that, or a chiller because they didn't know what they were doing. Which created a lot of doubt in a lot of customers' minds. So I'm sort of cycling back because we are, I think, going through another phase in the business of technologies changing again. And how do you move people if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Or, hey, we saw these other people over here, they tried this and the chiller got ruined. Talk to me about when you advise companies, how do you sort of get your customers on board with new ideas and new concepts?
Good question. And I agree with you. There's technology innovations are ongoing. They have been for 50 years, 60 years. They'll continue. Some of the technology innovations back in the 80s with DDC are as dramatic as anything that's presented now.
Yes.
And if you recall, back then, one of the big suppliers of energy management systems, supervisory systems, was IBM System 1. So here's Powers, Honeywell, Johnson. We get into the business, and who shows up is IBM. And there was a lot of concern that they were such a big, strong company, they were going to wipe everybody out. But they didn't have the fundamental knowledge of the tribal knowledge of the control systems, and they never mastered that. So they went away. And to the credit, the other manufacturers that I mentioned did a better job of developing the technology. And as you say, a lot of new entrants showed up. That was back when Allerton was a startup. Automated Logic was a startup. All of these companies that are now well established entered the field and took a big part of the industry.
Well, the parallel we draw now, Rick, would be, I remember a couple of years ago, all of a sudden Google and Microsoft started showing up at Realcomm Ibicon, for example, and everybody was freaking out that they were just going to come in, Apple with the Nest and so on and so forth. And they've gotten involved, but I think that maybe they learned the lesson from back in the 80s that you still got to have the core people that understand how the chillers work and how the equipment works. So, it seems like the takeaway there is to find a way how to work with them as opposed to being threatened by them.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There was, if you recall, Cisco acquired a building automation company.
That's right.
And a company called Richard Zeta, very innovative building automation company. And they're not a player. They never figured out how to, and this is not a knock on Richard Zeta, this is just, they're IT people, and they're really good at that. Now, building automation rubs up against IT a lot, of course, especially now with cybersecurity, but it's the fundamental understanding of boilers, chillers, HVAC systems, VAV systems, variable refrigerant flow systems. understanding all of that is the secret sauce here. If you don't do that well, you can't come in as an outside company and just start putting technology on the wall.
Yeah, doesn't matter how good your steering wheel is. If you don't have tires on the car, it's not going to work well.
Right.
So Rick, you went from, sort of launching and being involved with that wave of technology, the building automation controls, and then you went off in your own business, right? You had a couple of businesses. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I had a good career at the company. Company went through some changes. MCC, Mark Controls, bought the company. Then the company got sold to Landis and Gear Stafa, and I went on my own. As many people became system integrators, I left to become a telecommunications person. This was, if you recall, after the breakup of the AT&T Bell system in 1984. There was an opportunity to be an independent telecommunications contractor, and I did that with some venture capital backing. Very similar industry, installing telephone systems, servicing telephone systems, actually managing them for the building owners. And it's very similar, just not HVAC control.
And then you did lighting as well, right?
Yeah, then I joined a company that made lighting control panels. And as you recall, most of the controls manufacturers also sometimes put a relay panel into control lighting.
Right.
And it was either a General Electric relay panel, or in our case, we had a company called Microlight. There was a company called Triad that had a Johnson interface that did a lot of jobs.
I remember Triad, yeah.
We did a lot of lighting controls, and they were we tended in Microlight in the 90s. We tended to do big sports stadiums, so we did NBA, NHL arenas, football and baseball stadiums, and we put a big lighting control system in that would allow you to change the lighting to create entertainment. So the first big job we did was the United Center in Chicago, and that was such a great success. As the Chicago Bulls went through their championships, everybody saw that and said, "We want one of those."
Nice.
We did that, and that business and the sister companies got sold to Honeywell in 1999.
Okay, I got you. And then when that got sold, is that when you started doing your consulting business?
No, I took a job, another job in the communications business, a company called Clearcom out on the West Coast that provides intercom systems. So if you're familiar with live broadcast TV, everybody in the studio has an intercom system, and they might have an earbud in their ear if they're on air, but everybody in behind has an intercom system, so they can talk back and forth and say, "Turn up the lighting" or "Turn up the sound," or and we did that for a few years. Then I came back to Siemens.
Okay. All right. Well, I got a couple questions I want to unpack with you here, because first of all, what was your first exposure like to venture capitalist? Because that's a critter I think most people that I know, business owners, are a little bit afraid of.
Well, let me share my view on that. There's first of all, in my view, my experience, there's a big difference between venture capital and private equity.
Oh,
and a lot of people think they're the same thing. They use the words interchangeably. In my experience, venture capitalists are the ones that will invest in a new technology, unproven technology with no sales, and they'll take that risk and they'll bring that kind of product to market. And that's very early stage stuff. So if you had some kind of a widget and it was going to be better than anything on the market, but you haven't sold any yet, venture capitalists will invest in that and try to take it to market and make it a success. The hit rate is fairly low in that world. Now, you hear all the great success stories about somebody who invested in Apple or Google or whatever, but realistically, there's not very many Apples or Googles. And everything else, a lot of times they lose money. Private equity, on the other hand, is financial investors, but typically a private equity firm, certainly the one I'm with, they invest in existing companies. So we'll go find, I'll give you an example for Alberio. We'll go find an existing system integrator that's been in business for 25 years, got customers, got good revenue, making money, profitable, and the owner's ready for retirement. We buy that business. That's an established business with good history of performance, and we'll buy a bunch of them. So we'll consolidate that. And now here's the other thing. There's some bad experiences there where consolidation of businesses can go bad as well. But Eric, this is like a lot of things. There's good and there's bad.
Yes.
A good consolidation is, we call ours buy and build. So we buy companies, we invest in them, we build them to be better companies. There's a different private equity approach, which is a roll-up, which is you put all of the contractors together, then you squish out the excess. You consolidate the accounting, you consolidate the sales, you reduce the salaries, you bump the prices, and that destroys a business. And there's
go ahead.
There's certainly enough history of those bad stories, but on the other side, there's good history. Like Alberio Energy is a good story.
Tell us that story, if you will, about Alberio.
So Alberio Energy, the idea was to build a national organization by acquiring independent system integrators who were primarily BAS players. And here's something that is misunderstood. It wasn't a product play. We weren't going to acquire 20 companies and then change them all to a certain kind of BAS system. We were going to acquire a good system integrator who had an established business, was profitable. Didn't matter what BAS system they had, as long as it was one of the top BAS brands. So Allerton, Automated Logic, Delta, Johnson Controls, Siemens, Tritium. If they represented that, fine. We're not going to change that. Because one company's in Philadelphia, one's in San Diego, one's in Denver. It didn't really matter that that was their building automation product. So in the case of Alberio, we acquired over 25 of those organizations. And a lot of the owners are like a Pat Marsala. They built their business, and they've even got people in the organization to run it. We come along and we help them monetize their years of hard work. We cash them out. And by doing that, we say, now guess what? You're part of an organization. There's 25 of you here. Why don't you collaborate amongst yourselves to decide what's best practice? And that's how to make the business better.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Because, all right, let me back up for a minute, because I can really see how that could help everybody concerned. But obviously, you look at a lot of companies, and it sounds like systems integrators is maybe your sweet spot. What are some things you typically see? For example, I mean, what is it that maybe I'm a systems integrator? I'm happy with my business. What is it maybe that I don't know yet that you see over and over again that systems integrators listening to this could benefit from?
The most common thing I see, Eric, is they've got a nice business. Maybe they're making 8, 10% pre-tax. And they're fighting it out in the market in new construction, and they're doing service. And service might be 15 or 20% of revenue. And we look at a business like that and we say, well, the best players have service that's 50% of revenue, and it's higher margin. And here's how we do it. First of all, we get a list of every installation they've ever done, and we try to determine if we've done any service on that location in the last 3 years. Because many of these system integrators say, oh, we do as much services as we can possibly do because we're the authorized ABC brand in the territory. They have to come to us. That's not really true. Have you ever done somebody else's competitive system? Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Somebody's doing yours, and you can buy Allerton parts, automated logic parts. You can buy it from lots of different places. Heaven forbid you can buy it from a distributor on the other side of the country. They're not supposed to sell it to you, but you can buy it from them, and you can do that job. And you can get skilled to do that job. So a lot of these people have not maximized service, or the other thing they do is they're in the new construction market, and they say, well, that's a competitive market. The prices are set by the market. That's the best we can do is a 20% gross profit. No, that's not true. The best players have a much higher gross profit because they don't do the public bid work where there's 12 bidders. And guess what? 12 bidders, the low bid gets the work. Whether they are qualified or not, they're going to get the work. Yeah, if you focus on that sector, you can't make any money. But if you do owner direct, negotiated work, negotiated design build work, if you get into a team like that, you can make decent money. And so we help these people, and it's not us saying it. What we'll do is we'll point out another firm in the organization and say, hey, so-and-so does that really well. Why don't you go talk to them?
So smart. So smart. Yep. So they hear it from their peers.
Yeah, and then another thing they do is a lot of these players have a territory that was assigned by the manufacturer, and that's what they do. But they get involved with a regional account, a regional customer who has properties in adjacent states or nearby, and they can't serve that customer in those locations. So we come in and we say, well, guess what? We got a national footprint. Let's talk about those regional customers. And we may not be able to take your brand into a different state, but what we can do is we can have a sister company service that account, and we share those accounts, even national accounts. And so that's been very, very helpful. And so Alberio's developed into a system integrator that is different than the global corporations who have big branch networks. We're not tied to a single brand. We're a multi-brand, multi-location system integrator.
Right, but it seems like for the systems integrator, the advantage, if I'm understanding correctly, is they're able to cash out, right? So if you've started, they're able to cash out, but still stay in the game, but then play a bigger game, right? Because now you're part of this organization that you have expertise, shared resources, and things like that. Is that yes. One of the advantages?
Yeah, and so someone who is retirement age, a system integrator who's retirement age or thinking about retirement, he's got to decide how to preserve the value in his business. And if he's got a couple of choices. He can turn it over to the employees with an ESOP and continue to monitor it, or he can cash out with somebody like us. And if he cashes out with somebody like us, he has all the upside that you just described, which is the business can grow faster, there's better career opportunities, and those employees still get to stay in the business and now have the opportunity to be leaders in that business, as well as career growth across the organization.
You're talking to somebody, do they typically go, our company's worth a lot more than that?
Well, yes, Eric, that's a common situation. It's like selling your house, or your car, except in that world, there's a really good set of comparables. If you sell your house, real estate agent will say, here's the comparables in your neighborhood relative to the size of the lot and size of the house. Here's what your house sells for. There isn't that kind of a comparable thing, or in cars, it's a Kelley Blue Book. You don't have that in system integrators. What you have is a lot of word of mouth. Oh, I heard a guy sold for 10 times his annual net income. You hear all kinds of stories like that, or brokers come in and they say you should be able to get this or that. Or the worst thing is the brother-in-law, who's not even in the business, comes in and says, hey, that business is worth X million. What we typically try to do is we say, first of all, you don't buy 25 or 26 companies if you're not paying fair prices. So that's our history. Go talk to some of these owners that we've acquired from, and they'll tell you. One thing we do is, if you want to use a broker, we'll recommend a broker we trust, and we'll let them set a valuation. We'll come in and we'll do our due diligence, and we'll give you a valuation, and we'll see if we can have a meeting of the minds. But don't presume you know what the business is, because you've never sold a business.
Yeah. Well said. In your experience, what makes a good business?
I think three things make a good business here. One, it's history of performance. That is, a system integrator has done projects, they've finished the installations on time, they've provided service to the customers, they've got good customer retention on the service side. Second thing is they've got an experienced and certified group of employees. That is, they've got project managers, and maybe the project managers have project management certification. Technicians have been well trained by the manufacturers. The management people might have taken some management courses. Longevity in the field or in the workforce is really important. Because it shows that it's a good place to work. People have stayed there for a while. They've committed their career to that company, and that's really good. And then the third thing is, on the customer side, we like people who are, for want of a better phrase, are up market. They're not doing retail stores. They're not doing branch banks. They're not doing little standalone Starbucks store, because, as you know, that a lot of that is a rooftop and a thermostat. And we want to be up market into more complex buildings, because there's less competition and there's more value you can bring to that. So if they've got that kind of a customer profile, we like those three things.
Excellent, excellent. Well, obviously you've seen a lot of businesses, but you've also seen and probably mentored a lot of leaders of businesses. What makes a good leader, Rick, in your experience?
I think a good leader is a person who wants to manage a team win kind of an attitude. What's not good is someone that says, I want to be a boss to boss people around. That's not what leadership is. Leadership is building good teams and making those teams successful. And another thing is, good leaders are people who have a history of self-development. They've done an assessment of their own needs and skills, and they've spent time developing themselves. Now, that may be technical, it may be some sort of a management course. It may be a diversity and inclusion type of a course, but we're looking for somebody that's already in their career made that kind of a commitment.
Nice. Okay, best advice you've ever gotten and the best advice you've ever given.
Best advice is do what you say you're going to do. That is, if somebody comes along and says, hey, can you do this? And you say, yeah, I'll send that to you by Friday. Make absolutely sure you do that. And just be careful before you make that promise.
Yeah.
Because treat the promise like a vow. I promised Eric I would do that.
So you do it. You show up on time and can complete what you say you're going to do.
Right. Another piece of advice is share the credit where it's due to those that help you, and be sincere about it. So let's say a team works on a project and you have a particularly good outcome. Take the time to walk around, and one phrase I really like is praise in public, coach in private.
Nice.
So if the team, let's say you're celebrating and you're a big win, you take the time when everybody's in the room to say, Sally did a good job on this, and Fred did a good job on that, and Eric contributed here. If you can't say something good about somebody, take them in private and say, you could have done better here. Don't criticize them, coach them.
Nice. Yeah, that seems to be a big theme with you, and a very valid theme. If you had to recommend 2 or 3 books to our audience that have had an influence on your business life or personal life, what would they be?
I like Stephen Covey's Habits of 7 Habits of People.
Yep.
Actually, I've got my bookshelf over here, Eric. Let me go look at it. I like the 1 Minute Manager.
Yep. Remember that one. Yep.
And what's really good about that is it teaches you, if you're walking down the hallway and you're thinking, Fred did a really good job on this, poke your head in his cube and say, Fred, you did a good job. That's
nice.
A 1 Minute Manager.
Yeah.
And don't just walk by and think it. Just do it.
Well, Rick, boy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you passing this wisdom on to our audience. As we begin to sort of wind down here, do you still mentor people at all? And if so, what sort of people do you mentor?
Yes, I do. I am actively mentoring people. I prefer someone that's in a new role, a CEO or a president role in this industry, in the BAS industry. Now, that could be a system integrator. It could be a distributor. But I'd like to do that and help them with their leadership challenges.
Okay. So we got that. You're doing the mentoring. I think you're going to have to write a book is what I'm thinking. So I definitely want to get a signed copy when you do that, because you got so much wisdom, and I'm probably going to have you come back on the show, because there's so much more I'd love to talk to you about. But for the sake of time, I think I'm going to have to wind it up here. I guess the final thing for our systems integrators out there that maybe have heard what you've said about systems integration, and maybe you're thinking, hey, I'm getting close to retirement age or whatever. I mean, is it appropriate for something like that to contact you? Is that how that works? And if so, let's give people your contact information for either the mentoring or the possible acquisitions.
Yeah, Eric, that would be, I'd be very interested in talking to any business owner. Now, we've done buy and build consolidations in building automation, mechanical contracting, fire and security contractors, and we're doing a 4th one now for boiler and chiller services. So anybody in those 4 fields that has been thinking about their business and they want to understand the process, be glad to talk. And it's just more information. Because you might think you know how it works, and you might think you know what the valuation is on your business, but it doesn't hurt to talk to someone that's, we've done 50 acquisitions between those 4 companies. And,
wow.
So you don't do that without having very fair pricing and treating the owners fair.
Right.
And glad to talk, obviously, talk confidentially. A lot of us know each other in the industry, so clearly confidence is important, but glad to do that.
All right, Rick, I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. How do people reach you, Rick?
Best way to reach me is my email at Huron, which is R LeBlanc, my last name, LEBLANC, at huroncapital.com.
Very, very cool. Well, I kind of got an odd idea here because as a business owner myself, I could see where I might be kind of interested, but kind of afraid if I, gave you a call or sent you an email that, I might just be badgered all the time about selling the business or whatever. And not that I would think you would do that, but I get those emails and calls virtually every single day from people I don't even know. But I'm kind of thinking, Rick, what if we did like sort of a live stream, like maybe a, something on Zoom or something like that, where people could just listen anonymously, no email registration, no anything like that. But where they could just get the information, that way. Would you be up for doing something like that? Just so if people wanted to, no obligation, but just wanted to learn more about how to package their business or what that was all about?
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful to have a Q&A session where common questions that people might have, I can explain our process and why it's been successful with so many acquisitions. And people can listen, and that's just additional information as part of their decision-making process.
That sounds great. So if our listeners out there are interested, please just reach out in comments, and let me know. Yeah, I'm interested in that. And then I'll see if I can get hold of Rick again and get him to come back and do it. Rick, you've been so gracious with your time and your knowledge and your wisdom. Truly a legacy voice. Thank you so much for passing knowledge to the next generation.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Legacy Voices. Subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. To get all the control news you can use, including other industry podcasts, please visit us at controltrends.com.